Hey, it's Jordan with TYT Politics. I am here with Nick Brana. You're founder of the Draft Bernie group and initiative. You also worked for Bernie, the senator on his campaign, national policy outreach director, was it?
Yeah, National Political Outreach Coordinator.
Got
That's
it.
right.
And you had some other roles with him. You worked for Our Revolution in its infancy, so you kind of are familiar to the Bernie world. I'm going to get into Draft Bernie, which is interesting in a minute, but I wanted to first ask you, the latest. I don't even know what you would call it: arrogance, tone deafness, shame that's coming out of the DNC. I reported over the weekend some of the details from the courtroom in South Florida where a DNC lawyer that's defending the DNC against this lawsuit brought on by Bernie voters essentially says, "Oh well, like we didn't do this, but legally, if we wanted to, we could just turn back to the old days, pop a few cigars, and choose the candidate in a back room." What were your thoughts?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I was on a state and regional organizing call with Draft Bernie leads, and I said to them, for that reason alone, if you set everything else aside, and just for that one arrogance alone, tells you that the Democratic Party is basically affirming its right to rig the election in the future. It's saying basically, no, this is the way that, we have that was fully within our purview to do. We can do it. We'll do it again. We can do it in 2018. If you try to challenge us in the primaries, we'll do it in 2020 too. So for that reason alone, I think that the Democratic Party is really disqualified as a democratic institution,
And one thing I find interesting is it's not just the party, but you're seeing all the familiar faces now. MSNBC, it's almost like they've established a green room just for Clinton rejects. They have Jennifer Palmieri on all the time now, and Robbie Mook and Neera Tanden. They actually have Hillary Clinton on today. And it's just like, listen, whether we agree politically or not, people are entitled to earn a living. If they want to go on, they could go on. But it's almost like between the establishment and their allies in the media, they're just trying to say, no, 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 this was just a fluke. There's nothing wrong with the pundits. There's nothing wrong with the politicians. There's nothing wrong with the party. It's just this was an anomaly. Back to business. Let's hear from the pundits who lost to a reality TV star, and onward we go.
Yeah, exactly. And in my mind, what should be happening, what traditional political logic would tell you would be happening is that you have Donald Trump, you have this authoritarian reality TV star, vulgar reality TV star on the one hand, basically just attacking working people, a daily onslaught from him. And so that should be leading to this massive influx into the Democratic Party, into the opposition party. Then on the other hand, so that's one point. That's one kind of force. And then on the other hand, you have Bernie Sanders, the most popular politician in the country, trying to bring people into the Democratic Party every day, crisscrossing the country on tours. And that, again, should tell you massive influx. It should be leading to a massive influx into the so-called opposition party. Well, guess what? Party affiliation numbers show that the Democratic Party is actually shrinking. It's actually declining. And that really is remarkable in my mind when you see you've got Donald Trump on the one hand and you've got Bernie Sanders, both of them doing their best to bring people into the Democratic Party, and still people are leaving the Democratic Party. And that shows that people are really seeing through the bullshit at this point. They really do not see, they recognize the Democratic Party is not an opposition party. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing with Draft Bernie, because people are that ready for something else.
So I've never talked to you about Draft Bernie. I know you've spoken with others. But basically, for the layman, you're essentially trying to convince a creature of Washington, love his policies, but he's definitely been in Washington for a few decades. Somebody who, despite having the right message and the right policies, has never conveyed really a strong will to break literally from the establishment and go off on his own, meaning running as an independent or Green Party or this and that. someone who, as far as I know, has kind of avoided the question of whether he would run as a separate party or be the figurehead for a new party. So I'm not challenging you, but I am asking how realistic is it that you're going to convince Bernie at, God willing, with health and everything, 78 years old, to, you don't need them. We have, 20,000 or 20 million strong behind you, and you need to run in this party.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm kind of baffled by how so many people are so skeptical of the idea that Bernie would actually do this or entertain this. Bernie, let's talk about that for a second. Bernie is the longest serving independent in Congress, as he reminds us often. Bernie is the one who was trying to start a radical anti-capitalist party in the 70s, the Liberty Union Party, to actually overthrow the two major parties in the 70s. This is the guy who had to be talked out of running as an independent for president in 2016 because people told him, no, you'll never get the media coverage you need. That kind of thing, basically. You'll never build the following you need, which he now has. This is the guy who left the Democratic Party he was so eager to leave that he couldn't wait. He left during the DNC convention. This is the guy who has said repeatedly, actually, that if the Democratic Party doesn't reform, then the action will be in a third party. That's his quote. The action will be in a third party. Jane has said the same thing. Jane, his closest advisor, Jane Sanders, and wife. And so to me, it's really striking that people would believe that. Actually, just a few days after we launched Draft Bernie, Chuck Todd asked Bernie about us on Meet the Press, and Bernie actually kept the door open to starting a new party. And so I think it's really the fact that people don't know all of these things. They're not aware of all of these things, because you've got on the one hand the media telling you, oh, it would never happen, which is what MSNBC and NBC and Chuck Todd tried to do right after we came out. They tried to basically take us out right away. That tells you something, by the way, about how threatened the establishment is by us. I mean, at that point, we were 3 days into creating the group, and they were already attacking us, corporate media. I mean, we were a tiny group at that point. And so that's how threatening the idea is. So I also want to say, Jordan, that just this past week, for those who don't think, oh, Bernie would never do it, Jane Sanders is now retweeting us. Jane Sanders is retweeting Draft Bernie. So is Nina Turner. Nina Turner, in fact, after my interview with Cornel West on Democracy Now!, where Cornel West endorsed us, Nina Turner retweeted our donate link. So
yeah, no, I'm actually less skeptical. I'm actually
it.
less skeptical than most, but I also think, not to get too abstract here, but there's also a psychology that you're up against, because I think Bernie, as a person, I don't know the man. I know people who are close to him, as do you. I think he fundamentally actually thinks that if he keeps doing what he's doing, having these crowds, this and that, he will pull the Democratic Party to him. And I think that's his ultimate goal. You see him out for the minimum wage bill with Patty Murray, Chuck Schumer. I'm not saying that Chuck Schumer's motives are all altruistic, but how do you battle that? Even though you're seeing some, I mean, people might be like, "Oh, great, that you got retweeted." No, that is a big deal. Like the fact that they know what they're retweeting. But how do you compete? How do you challenge, Bernie Sanders, who, in his heart, seems to want to pull the people he's been working with for 20 years and has established relationships with over to his side, as he says, to look out the window. Mitch McConnell, he's going to make him look out the window. How do you tell Bernie that's not the way to do it?
The way to do it is by organizing, to show Bernie that, as Cornel West said, he wrote an article. He also appeared on Democracy Now! And when in the article, he said that we have to admit that the Democratic Party has failed us. And I think the way to do that is to show Bernie, for people to call on him, basically to do that. We have a petition. We also have something called a crowd pack. So the petition is something to Bernie where we are asking for people to sign, and it's basically for him to start the new party. The crowd pack is something where people can donate to, and they make a donation to the new party, which is conditional on Bernie starting it. And so they're pledging a donation. They're saying, if Bernie starts the party, I'm going to give this much, and that's on our website, draftbernie.org. And so this is how we basically show Bernie that it's time for something different. It's also, anytime you embark on a certain course or another, there's a certain level of inertia, obviously, a certain level of sunk cost into that strategy. But we have to, I think, look at that. The party is telling us as loudly as it can, I feel, in 100 different ways, that it doesn't intend on being the vehicle of the political revolution. Just with what you revealed this weekend, in terms of the fact that the party says, no, we don't even have to have primaries, really. We could just pick the candidates outright. In showing that the Democratic Party is not going to support progressives that are running in primaries, it's going to abandon them, as it's done a couple of times now. In showing that it's going to run as the party of the new Red Scare, and that it's basically going to say that there's nothing wrong with our model. The only problem is that Russia interfered, or whatever the heck excuse they want to make. And so I think it's really conveying that to Bernie. Some people don't know this, but Bernie was actually drafted to run for president. He was originally kind of against the idea, but a number of groups, including PDA, ran a campaign to draft Bernie. And they made sure that their supporters were at events, doing visibility, and essentially telling Bernie, look, we're here, this is what we want, we're ready, come and do it. And they also showed Bernie, also basically by telling him, all the time, doing events like this. And that's what we're trying to do here. It's the same thing. Bernie is responsive when he sees that kind of thing. And so part of what Cornel West and I did on the Democracy Now! Interview in that vein is we invited Bernie to a town hall to actually discuss this. Because my view is that the movement, regardless of which course it's going to take, it needs to discuss openly the options available to us. And we will be stronger as a movement for doing that. Not to pretend that one option doesn't exist or the other, really to come together and discuss that. And so I do think that if enough of us call on Bernie to go to that town hall, that he will attend. The last thing I'll say, Jordan, is that we had a Bernie phone bank day where we called into his offices last Wednesday. His staff told us that they have never received so many calls on any one issue or day before. That's astounding. That's really good. That's Bernie Sanders. That's amazing.
And how many people right now are part of your Draft Bernie initiative?
So there are thousands of people volunteering. There's about $120,000 in the crowd pack. People who've donated to the new party. There's about 33,000 who've signed the petition so far.
And the new party, is it an independent party, a progressive party?
Well, it will be progressive, of course.
Right.
Yes, it'll be independent, of course, of the Democratic and Republican parties. Mm-hmm. The idea is that once the movement, could come together and decide to do this, once Bernie Sanders decided it's time, then we would have a founding convention. At which point, no one would dictate the policies. I didn't want to create a platform myself or do it with Draft Bernie, with our supporters, because I feel like that's something that's actually up to the country and the movement as a whole. And so that's something that would happen at the founding convention. We'd have a founding convention. The platform would be decided there democratically by new party members, and also the party processes. Because as you know, as you just discussed, with these recent revelations from the DNC lawsuit, is that the party is structured in a way that makes it undemocratic by its very nature, by its rules, essentially. And so creating a structure of a party that is democratic, transparent, open, accountable, the leadership is elected by the membership, that's as important as getting a platform that is genuinely progressive, which is what people want, which is what they're not getting out of the Democratic Party and why they're not going there, why they're leaving.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, I want to look a little further. So let's say you do it. Bernie says, Nick Brana, you're a genius. I'm coming over. I want you, whatever, on his campaign policy team, a high up official. How do you, after you take Bernie, obviously he has the millennials. Obviously he's got a lot of older progressives who are still trying to change the world in their heart. But how do you cater to those, our parents or our grandparents or, African Americans who went the other way? It's not I do think if he runs, he would win. But what would be the strategy after he joins up with this new party? Because let's make no mistake. If you thought the corporate media was against him in 2016, it's going to be times 10 in 2020 with, a millennial army behind him, the wind behind his back, him still saying the same policies, maybe even going further.
It was against him, and it'll be against him if he tries to run in the Democratic Party again, too. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I think is not very well known is that 57% of the country says they want a major third party. So this isn't just kind of like a minority question. That's the majority. People who want a major third party is a majority. Only a little over a third of people say they don't want it, And Bernie, of course, is at 80% popularity inside the Democratic Party. And so the next step, it'll actually be an opportunity to build on what we did in the campaign and to actually represent those views in a way that is consistent and in a way in which you're not constantly being undermined within the institution that you're trying to work as you are within the Democratic Party. We saw Bernie in that joint interview with Perez. It was just amazing. Bernie would say, this is a problem, corporations, billionaires, the fact that they run the system is a problem. Perez, right next to him, would say, no, I don't believe that, basically. Bernie would say, I think we need single-payer Medicare for all. Perez would take a minute to say, no, I don't believe that. He would say, I think we need to expand Obamacare, And so it's really that consistency. People are looking for something big and bold. They're not satisfied with playing around the edges, And I think that's something that was one of the most important lessons that we can take from the campaign, I think, Jordan, is that when Bernie started the campaign, he didn't have anything. All he was at 3% name recognition nationally. The only thing he had was that message and his integrity, that bold message about big change. And with that, only after that came the $250 million that he raised on the campaign. Only after that came the nearly 100% name recognition. Only after that came the media, attention and this renaissance in the independent media too that has happened that kind of built up with the progressive movement during his campaign too. And so all of these things followed, So really, that's one of the most important lessons that we can take, is that the establishment is trying to convince us desperately that no, you need to have the establishment media on your side, and you need to have the big money, otherwise you can't compete. Otherwise you're unilaterally disarming or bringing a spoon to a knife fight or whatever the heck it is, But that's actually not what we've seen. What we've seen is that you win by being consistent. You win by sticking to your principles, and that's what I feel like Draft Bernie as a group has actually proved that once again, because we started with very little. We really started with nothing. And now we've got a major organization that's making a real difference in the progressive narrative and actually bringing people like Jane Sanders and Nina Turner and Cornel West, to be able to say things in favor of it, in terms of Cornel West, and to join it fully. So, yeah, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it seems like you have a lot of momentum, so I'll definitely keep in touch with you, get your thoughts as more comes out of Astounding astounding news from the DNC and the Democratic Party. You're a good person to talk to, so thanks for taking the time.